Nothing makes Mariella McLee feel good the way being saddled up in the cockpit of a huge mech suit does. Its power, plain and simple. The ability to single-handedly change a battle. There's nothing in the world like it. The knowledge that if you push that red button, people die in spectacular fashion. The cockpit is a throne upon a mountain of skulls, painted in blood and fire, the dominion of which reaches as far as the eye can see. Sure, that power is perfectly balanced by the fact that by simply possessing it, you are inevitably going to be at risk of a painful and bloody death yourself. You step out onto the battlefield in one of those things and you paint a target on yourself for everything with a gun in a 10-mile radius. Mariella didn't mind that. In fact, the risk was part of what made piloting such a passion of hers. It was everything else she couldn't fucking stand. McLee, I wasn't finished talking. Like that. I was. Fuck off, Rogers. Lieutenant Elizabeth Rogers, rebel wing lead and royal pain in the ass. She didn't really expect her to fuck off, but it would be a nice change of pace if she did. You can't just walk out of a debriefing after a mission like that. We need to know what happened, and you're the only one who knows. Well, if walking away and ignoring her wasn't going to work, then that just left ditching her. She just had to round that corner, hop the railing, and she'd skip the entire security checkpoint. A rule she knew would take a cold day in hell for Rogers to break herself. By the time Rogers caught up to her, she'd be drunk enough not to care. You got a pilot killed, McLee. And worse, you put the lives of every single one of us at risk by breaking formation like that. Do you have any idea how bad it would have been if the maneuver hadn't worked? You could have destroyed this entire cell. Keep talking, Lieutenant. She could see the railing, her drop-off point, to the bushes below outside the rebels' walled headquarters. Just a few more feet, and she could be rid of this headache at least for a few minutes. Hey, I'm talking to you! The shout didn't get through to her, but the hand on her bicep did. Mariella wasn't entirely sure what happened. It was all fury and spit, and a sound that she could have sworn belonged in the woods. 1 second she was walking calmly towards her escape route, and the next she had Lieutenant Rogers pressed face first into the brick wall behind them with the offending hand held in a vice grip so tight she could feel the officer's joints dislocating beneath her fingers. She was panting, breathing hard and heart pounding in her chest, and a throbbing pain in her head that spiked with every beat of her heart. Her other hand was knotted in the lieutenant's long hair, gripping with enough force that surely she had torn at least some of the cornstalk strands from her scalp. The officer's face was scrunched up in pain, and the impact of her face against the brick had drawn blood from several thin welts. Tears were pooling in her eyes, threatening to spill over, and Mariella could see what she was feeling as clear as day. Terror. She had finally done something that shut the self-righteous idiot up. Gone was any indication of fight or retribution. The rebel pilot pinned between her and the wall was just scared for her life and wanted nothing more than to be anywhere but there. A racing heart jumped so high into her throat that she thought she might puke. Instead, she swallowed the pooling salvia and pushed the lieutenant's face a little harder into the wall. I kill imps, Rogers, and I won't make an exception for you. Not today, but you touch me again, and that might change. Stay the fuck away from me until there are more imps to kill, and you've got the balls to accept casualties in war. The ice rush of adrenaline in her veins as she unbraided the fingers from the lieutenant's hair, only to see a clump of blonde fall away, was more consuming than any firefight with a mech. The terror in the officer's eyes, the blood on her ruined face, a small bald clump at the back of her head. Even the way her normally perfect dress, shirt, and jacket had gotten disheveled during the process. It was all too much. Before her knees could give up on her, Mariella turned around, gripped the railing, and vaulted herself up and over. The ground rushed up towards her in a moment of blissful freefall before she felt the grassy soil impact her boots. Then gravity caught up and sent sharp lances of pain up and down her legs like long needles jabbing into her bones. The pain helped clear her head a little. She had just assaulted an officer. She could be imprisoned, or worse, grounded and exiled. And for what? Because she had grabbed her arm. But flashes of the encounter played back in her mind, and she lingered on the image of Lieutenant Rogers' face pressed into the wall. Blood, tears, and true, genuine terror. Mariella wasn't sure what ached more, a heart pounding in her throat, or her cock pushing painfully against the constraints of her cargo pants. She had to get out of there. She needed a drink. The local community was a dirty little stop in the middle of nowhere. Cold ocean in one direction, mountains in the other, and an unforgiving coastal highway that had gods knew how many similar small towns dotting its landscape. This one just happened to be the one that got to hide the rebel headquarters in this quadrant until the Imperial heat got too much and they had to pack up shop to the next little nameless town. The landscape was dark, muddy, and cold, and the people were similarly tough and flavorless. Peasants, laborers, criminals, and vagabonds, the type of people most willing to hide a terrorist cell. The towns had blended together over the years, with hundreds of greasy faces blurring together into one dull cacophony of strangers with tired eyes. They all looked and sounded the same to Mariella, broke losers who like to pretend they're honorably hiding the rebel fighters from their Imperial overlords, right up until one of those losers realizes their honor has a price tag that the Imperials would be more than happy to buy. Then the cell would up and leave to the next town full of losers until someone else cashed in their ticket, and again, and again, and again. There was a good chance that one day one of those people would be the death of her. Ungrateful fucking mongrels, the lot of them. And their stares never helped. Wide-eyed, gawking stares from the flat-footed locals who fell on one side or the other. The naive idealists who thought she represented some worthy cause, and the defeated fatalists who thought she had the strength of a legend for fighting oppression. Both camps were idiots, and those stares just pissed her off more. Most towns had nothing to offer Mariella except cheap drinks and even cheaper women. But, for its credit, this town did have one thing that made it stand out amongst the others. Mariella rushed through the bar doors with a nervousness she hadn't felt since high school. The heart was pounding in her throat, pumping cold blood through her veins, while her stomach did somersaults, and she felt like she was walking into a classroom late on an exam day. And there she was. The bartender was standing at the center of the bar, silver hair gleaming in the mood lighting, stars twinkling in her eyes, a thin smile on her perfect lips, waiting, as always, for her. Feet dragging to a stop, Mariella fumbled to an awkward pause in the doorway and felt her breath catch. The rest of the bar fell away, leaving her standing at one end of a tunnel, and the bartender waiting expectantly for her at the other. Suddenly nervous, she swallowed the lump that had formed in her throat and willed herself forward. She didn't walk so much as she glided on legs she couldn't feel until she was standing in front of the bartender, only a beer-stained slab of wood standing between her and perfection incarnate. For just a moment, the world stood still. It was just Mariella, the bartender, and the crushing weight of guilt. I'm sorry I'm late, sir." The words flushed out of her like steam out of a safety valve, sputtering and evaporating pathetically. She wanted to say more. She wanted to explain that she had been held up, that she had a bad day and couldn't make it at the usual time, but all she could manage was a desperate 5-word blur that still felt like too much and not enough. The few seconds that it took the bartender to respond felt like an age. Somehow she felt even worse, like she had crossed some unspoken boundary, that she'd offended a beautiful woman and would spend the rest of her life devoid of this momentary spot of heaven, sent sunlight in a dark and cold, miserable little world. Then she smiled, and everything was right again. "I know you are, darling. I forgive you." Choirs and angels paled in comparison to the beauty and melody in the echoes of those few precious words. It was everything Mariella could do to not come in her pants right there like a hopeless virgin. No, she just giggled like an idiot schoolgirl as the tension broke instead. "I have your favorite seat in the corner ready for you. Sit, I will be right over," she commanded, and Mariella was more than eager to oblige. She rounded the corner of the bar and found her normal stool nestled against the wall. It was an isolated corner, away from the action and the noise, where she could settle in and enjoy some one-on-one time with the beauty on the other side of the bar. After the stress of the past hour, the wave of fatigue that came crashing into her as she settled into the bar stool felt like a smothering blanket, and she was suddenly very grateful for her quiet corner away from everything waiting for her outside. The chair was sticky and stained. The bar smelled like stale beer, and sticking a screwdriver in your ear would be better than the musique de jour. But lately it was the only source of comfort she could find in the unforgiving mire of rebel life. She had settled into a comfortable routine since her cell had set up shop there 3 months ago, and that comfort had nothing to do with the small town bar itself. The silver-haired bartender stepped around the corner of the bar, a statuesque form of beauty and elegance, like a marble statue made of flesh. Her thin smile always set into her features like it had been chiseled there at birth, told everyone in the room that she knew something they didn't. Her eyes sparkled with more stars than the night sky, and had a way of gazing past the skin to the soul beneath. Mariella fought the urge to cry. She settled at the bar in front of her, looking down towards her seated form, haloed in the bar lights like some gift from above. Mariella's heart pounded against her ribs like a prisoner wailing against a cage, and the anticipation made her vision blur. Had the lights always been that bright? Had the music always been so grating? She'd been waiting all day. Now there were only a few seconds between her and the ritual bringing sunlight to her life, and she felt like she was going to explode. A few seconds may as well have been a lifetime, an eternity of suffering stretching out between her and absolution. Then, the bartender's rag unfurled from the belt of her apron and was swept across the bar between them. Elegant figure eights traced into the polished wood grain, sweeping this way and that, clearing off whatever remnant of the past stubbornly clung there. Mariella let go of the breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Weight that she had noticed fell off her shoulders as their little ritual began, and she couldn't stop the nervous giggle that bubbled up from her chest even if she had wanted to. "Long day?" she asked. "You have no idea," Mariella began with an explosive sigh. "Today has been absolute shit. I've been looking forward to this all day." "Well, you are here now, safe and sound. You can let that weight off your shoulders, finally." A comfortable warmth blossomed in Mariella's chest as she sank in her chair, letting her elbows prop herself up on the bar. She exhaled all the way as she settled into her position, and watched as the bartender's beautiful hand traced circles on the surface between them. Just fucking had it out with the lieutenant on the way over. A bitch up her ass was moralizing at me, trying to come at me like I'm some fucking asshole because someone died. Like, bitch, it's war. People die. I do not see why she would want to confront you over something like that. People die in war. It is unavoidable. Someone you are fighting with dying is a shame, but it is nothing worth shedding tears over. Mariella beamed, light shining out from within. Through the warm blanket of fatigue, she was grinning like an idiot at the bartender's approval. See? You get it. I'm not the one that pulled the trigger. I didn't kill her. We were stuck in a jam, and I had an idea, and the idea saved one out of two of us. That's it. It could have been me in the other position. It was a coin flip, but no. Instead, I'm here getting called a loose cannon like I'm some fucking rookie out putting people at risk. Not like I've got the highest fucking kill count in this entire goddamn cell. They do not appreciate you. The bartender's melody rang as her hand drew elegant loops through the remains. You have single-handedly done more damage to the Imperial war machine than any of the other pilots in your cell. An accomplishment which is not even a close competition, by any means. You were born for this, and they do not know how to handle you. The pride that welled up in Mariella's chest was enough to bring pinpricks to her eyes. She didn't have a word for the overwhelming emotion that were roiling in her chest, so instead she just watched the bartender's pretty hand trace shapes in the wood as the words kept spilling easily from her lips. Damn right. I was born for this. Like, today I'm on this mission, right? Top secret rebel shit. We up in the mountains, long ranges, long sidelines, lots of little nooks and crannies. Perfect place for my Litorius. It's a shooting gallery for something nimble with a lot of firepower. I killed 56 Imperial infantrymen, 2 IFVs, a tank, and an entire Doru one-on-one. Good girl. A shiver raced from the base of Mariella's neck to the base of her spine, sending chills radiating outwards that all coalesced into a cold warmth at her crotch. She could feel the warmth in her cheeks spreading at the same time as a small wet patch in her underwear, leaving her squirming neatly in her seat as she stared at the clean space in the bar between them. Your usual? The question broke Mariella out of a blushing, turned-on daze, and she looked up at the bartender with wide eyes like she had just been caught with her hand in the cookie jar. She stammered, eyes straining against the glare of the bright lights as she managed to dumbly nod her agreement at the suggestion. Then the bartender got to work, her arms a blur of efficient motion as she reached for ingredients and tools. Even as she worked, the pristine woman looked like she couldn't be more at ease if she were at a resort world. Every motion was perfectly calculated, no effort was ever wasted, and watching her was like watching a ballerina make something mythical look easy. So, what were you doing up in the mountains that landed you such a kill count? Surely it must have been important to run into resistance like that. Like I said, top secret, but it was a sort of smash and grab thing. Attacking a fortified position, you know. 2 of us got sent one way and the LT took 2 others in another way, and we turned the place into a kill zone. 1 casualty on our side, but it was a mission success. And we killed 3 of their pilots, so the trade-off was totally worth it. Absolutely worth it. The bartender immediately agreed as she lined up the ingredients behind the bar in front of her. 1 for 3 is a reasonable trade-off, and if the mission was a success, then 1 lost life seems worth the price. You did well. Again, Mariella beamed at the praise, unconsciously leaning up in her seat as the grin threatened to make her look even more like an idiot than she already did. You said the lieutenant took 2 others on the mission? said Lieutenant Rogers, the bitch queen herself. Mariella nodded at the question, humming in agreement. Mm-hmm. LT came out on deployment herself to spearhead the heavy part of the operation. Metal scraped through ice as the bartender filled the shaker, then set it down between them and began pouring ingredients in. She couldn't help but watch the process as one thimble after another of different colored fluids were poured into the container from various heights, turning the mere process of pouring liquids into an art form of its own. Each mesmerizing pour of fluid was followed by the satisfying echo of ice crackling within its metal prison, drawing Mariella's attention further into the icy concoction before her. Do I recall correctly that I heard you say Lieutenant Rogers had her mech destroyed during the last deployment? Lucullus was destroyed by a Xyphos, your first time fighting one of those models. Despite not being able to look away from the beautiful creation process in front of her, Mariella flinched at the reminder. That was a bad operation, one of a string of bad luck engagements that had resulted in less than perfect outcomes. The Xyphos had been a surprise, one her cell hadn't been ready for, but in the end she had gutted that one just the same as any other Doru. Yeah, Lucullus is dead and gone, blown to bits, but I guess someone important decided they really wanted to get the LT back out there, because they shipped in a whole new mech for her. Sejanus, it's called, brand new design from the rebel scrapyards. The bartender clapped the lid onto the shaker, picked it up and began to shake the contents. It rattled loudly for a few shakes, then the beautiful woman worked it into a calm and steady rhythm that sounded almost like music to Mariella's brain. Sejanus, interesting choice of a name. How did they get the mech here? Is the local airspace not on lockdown? The shaker seamlessly transitioned from a right side grip to a left side grip, alternating in front of Mariella's eyes and catching her gaze. She followed the frosted metal container on its journey like it was some juvenile noisemaker, bobbing her head along idly to the phantom rhythm that the ice was pounding out from within. Trains, the answer slipped out in her voice, though she hadn't chosen the words herself. The whole thing was disassembled and loaded into train cars that run along the coast, mostly in scrap metal shipments from salvagers further south, sending shipments of metal from Imperial infrastructure work up here. The local truck drivers deliver these shipments to a few different destinations, then rebels pick up the pieces and assemble the whole mech on site. Sounds like impressive logistics. Shake, shake, shake. What kind of mech did they wind up assembling here? It's another heavy mech meant to get away with punching Dorus. Even has upgraded ERR to help defend against Xyphos attacks. She learned her lesson from last time, apparently. And the reactor class? Mariella hesitated. It seemed like a strange and intrusive question. What business did a bartender have asking about Rebel Mech's reactor class? She frowned, her eyebrows furrowing. The shaker slammed against the bar and made Mariella jump, her eyes going wide briefly. Whatever she was about to say was interrupted by the noise, and suddenly the shaker was raised and returned to its rhythm like nothing had happened. The bartender's impassive face and thin smile unchanged, and Mariella briefly wondered if she had imagined it. Sorry, what was that? She stammered hastily, struggling to recall why she had felt so paranoid only moments ago. The lieutenant's new mech, Sejanus. Is it powered by the normal X-32 reactor like yours? Or did they give her a better mech than you? Mariella bristled, one of her hands balling into a fist. Sejanus isn't better than my Littoris. I could take that fucker down any day. Sure, Sejanus has the new XO 3201 small modular reactor, but the power gain from the extra efficiency doesn't even come into play unless you're in a firefight that lasts longer than an hour, or you are fucking redlining that thing so much that you may as well be trying to fry yourself alive. It's simply numbers. It's 10 times the price for at most a 2% increase in efficiency. And for what? It's half the size of a normal reactor. They didn't even put extra weapons on her to make up that extra weight. They just covered the damn thing head to toe in ERR. You know what it's equipped with? A 20mm auto cannon, a rotary airburst warhead launcher, and 4-point defense nodes. They could have put so much more on that thing, but no. The dumbass wanted more protection and less firepower. Fucking pussy. I take the Torios over Cyanos any day. The idea that her precious Mag could in any way be inferior to the bitch queen's own Mag was enough to make her blood boil and her face heat up. She was getting worked up just thinking about it, her eyes wandering as her thoughts began to turn to her commanding officer. Then the bartender caught her attention by twisting the top of the shaker off with a flare, and suddenly the blue cocktail was pouring into a glass, and the sound of liquid filling a vessel made her ears perk up and any thoughts of a bitter rivalry faded away. "I have an important question, Mariella," the bartender began. "One that I have had for you for quite some time." "Okay, shoot." "Why do you do it?" Took a moment to pour her eyes away from the pouring blue liquid to fix the bartender with a curious look. The elder woman must have noticed her confusion, and after an amused glance, she continued. "Why do you fight for the rebels if you do not get along with them? Why are you not a mercenary or similar?" Mariella snorted. That was easy. She leaned back in her seat with a well-practiced expression that she'd call picturesque indifference, drawing up the confidence of a rebel ace as she puffed up her chest and replied, "I like to kill Imperials." "Okay," the bartender led, "but mercenaries often come into conflict with the Imperials as well. Surely if killing Imperials was your only goal, you could make a better life for yourself as a mercenary. Better pay, your choice of jobs and crew, and you do not need to constantly hide from the Imperial war machine." That gave her pause. Mariella hesitated. It seemed like such a simple premise. Instead of hiding in ramshackle villages in some desolated wasteland, she could be running operations for smugglers, drug runners, and weapons merchants. But no, she was living like a rat in the dirt, scraping by with the rebels. "I don't know," Mariella replied slowly. "They're the enemy. Someone needs to kill them. Why shouldn't it be me? You have been coming here nightly for 3 months now, and I have never once heard you speak about the rebels' cause," the bartender began, voice dripping with curiosity. "So I suppose I am looking for an answer to the opposite question. Why does it need to be you?" The simple question took the wind out of Mariella's sails entirely. She felt the air in her lungs grow heavy, and the weight in her chest was accompanied by a brief wave of nausea. Why did she have to be the one to do it? She remembered that once upon a time she had a reason, and it was a reason that she believed was good enough to risk her life for. But now, when she tried to think about the whole reason she was fighting, all she could draw up was that empty response. She was there to kill Imperials. Reason didn't feel important enough to remember anymore. "Because they are the enemy," Mariella trailed off, "and I'm really good at killing them." There was a beat of silence as the cocktail finished pouring into the glass, and Mariella was left drifting on her answer, listless. She remembered the rage she carried with her into battle, the urgency of chasing down every kill, the sheer desire to end the lives of her enemies. But she couldn't remember why she was there, in that base, with those rebels. Why she hadn't just done what the bartender had suggested and left years ago to make a more comfortable life for herself. "That sounds exhausting," the bartender mused calmly. "It is a lot of responsibility to carry without having a reason." Pointing it out made the blanket of fatigue that had been wrapped around her all night pull all the heavier. She was so much more tired than she realized. The fighting, the dying, the hiding, it was a constant that had left her stretched so thin she couldn't even remember why she was doing it. Mariella was left in awkward silence in the wake of the bartender's questioning. The blue cocktail sat unfinished on the bartender's side of the bar, so close and yet so far. There was an anxious itch buzzing at her nervous system, a thin stream of electricity jumping between her muscles, urging her towards the relief of the drink in front of her. Drinking would make the tumultuous storm of emotions swirling in her head easier to deal with. She couldn't reply to the bartender. Frankly, she just wanted a bottle of spirits and a dark corner to nurse her even darker thoughts. When had her involvement with the rebels become so shallow? When had she stopped believing in the cause? The wave of guilt that accompanied that thought was almost enough to make her puke her guts up right then and there. Then, there was a flash of brilliant green, and Mariella's attention was drawn to the vial that the bartender had pulled out from behind the bar. It was just a small glass thimble, as always, filled with a sparkling fluid that looked like a spiraling emerald galaxy. Any thoughts of guilt or emptiness were promptly chased away as Mariella's field of vision narrowed to the perfect slender hand popping the cork off of the bottled galaxy. "Do you know what I think, Mariella?" the angel sang. The vial was upturned and the sparkling green fluid mixed into the blue of the cocktail and diffused. A second later, a thin bar spoon was inserted into the mix and began to stir. The motions kicked up clouds of sparkles, and the two fluids began to blend together into a dizzying blue-green galaxy in a cup. Mariella couldn't look away. "I think you're a brilliant soldier, and an even better pilot. You cave paths through battlefields like a natural disaster, and you make your mech dance like a ballerina who knows her body of steel better than her body of flesh." The spoon's motion settled into a slow, steady circle, which kept the cloud of green glitter in a constant swirl of motion within the blue-green cocktail, making a dizzying array of colors pop out of the glass as the light hit the sparkles and reflected into spectrums of indescribable colors. "However, you are a terrible rebel." Mariella felt herself flinch, but she couldn't look away. She couldn't even conjure up a counterpoint. The bartender was right. She was a terrible rebel. She started, but she couldn't think of how to finish it. What did she even want to say? Did she even want to deny it? Did she want to apologize because it was true? Words failed her. None of them sounded right in her head. "Do not mistake that as condemnation, Mariella," the bartender added, an edge of amusement in her voice. "It is simply an observation. You are suffering because you are forcing yourself into the wrong shape. You have an image of yourself that you force yourself to conform to, but it is not accurate, nor is it fair." Mariella wanted to argue, but she couldn't. All she could do was stare at the galaxy in her cup as it was slowly stirred to the rhythm of the bartender's melodic voice. She was right, of course. She was always right. And oh, how she was suffering. "You are a brilliant pilot, but you are not a rebel. You fight with them because your paths crossed and they took you on. But you are not one of them, not really." The bartender's wrist flicked and changed the direction of the galaxy she was stirring, and for a moment Mariella thought it was the room that had started spinning in the opposite direction. "You said today that it was a coin flip whether you or the other rebel was the one to die. I do not believe that is true. Tell me, did you even consider sacrificing yourself to let the other rebel live?" Did she? She wanted to struggle for the answer, to search her soul and come up with any shred of decency, any sliver of the hero she was supposed to be. But the truth was far too simple to need to search for. It was just laying there, ripe for the picking. No, it felt awful, like her innards were being twisted from both ends and corkscrewed until the tension threatened to rip her in half from within. She had never even once considered the alternative of sacrificing herself for the cause. The thought hadn't crossed her mind any more than the thought to sprout wings and fly. Mariella's eyes watered, threatening to spill tears down her face. She wasn't a rebel, and probably never was in the first place. She was just a killer in a metal jacket that had been picked up like some stray dog. Her thoughts spiraled faster than the glittering cocktail before her, like she was chasing her tail in her head, trying to find some justification for her mere existence. Suddenly, the spoon was withdrawn from the glass, dripping tiny teardrops back into the broader galaxy. The bartender tapped the utensils against the rim of the glass, and the sound of metal plinking against glass made a sweet, heavenly ring, more appropriate of an instrument than barware. Her mouth was impossibly dry, and the urge to leap across the bar to snatch the cocktail from the bartender's hand was perfectly balanced by the invisible force keeping her rooted to the bar stool like she'd become part of the furniture. Her lips parted, and what little of her peripheral vision she still had began to fade until all that was left was the swirling emerald galaxy held captive in the glass in front of her. There was silence. Nothing but the eternal gap between Mariella and the escape in front of her. She was stuck, alone in her own head, with her thoughts racing as she tried to make sense of it all. What the hell had happened to her? When had she gotten so lost? Then the bartender sang, "I forgive you." The glass was pushed smoothly across the bar top, coming to a stop between her hands. Finally, the dam broke and the tears came flooding from Mariella's eyes, pouring down her cheeks in great rivers. She couldn't decide whether to sob or laugh, and the noise that came out of her was somewhere in between. She was overwhelmed with emotion, the sea of which was too vast and tumultuous for her to even give a name to. Was she happy? Was she sad? She had no idea. All she knew was that it was all too much. Drink. You have earned it today. The cold glass in her hands had never felt so good. She clutched it like it might flutter away any moment. It swirled in her hands and she swirled around it, and her lips melted with the glass, and suddenly the veil that had been hanging so heavily around her for so long lifted away. The sparkling taste defied categorization. None of the ingredients were ever familiar, and it washed the tumultuous storm from her mind as it raced down her throat in a great wave. Mariella wanted to savor it, take her time and enjoy the cocktail. It took the bartender so much time and effort to make, and she was such a generous woman for introducing her to it. But each gulp was like a mouthful of liquid relief, and it was everything she could do to not greedily down it in one go. Instead, she managed to stop halfway through the drink and laboriously peeled her lips away from the glass held in shaky hands. Everything in her body was screaming at her to keep going, to finish the drink that had been so perfectly made by the even more perfect woman before her. But she didn't want to disappoint the bartender and look ungrateful. "Thank you," Mariella slurred out around two wet lips, her tongue flicking out between letters to desperately lap up the sparkling remains. "Oh my fucking god, Thank you, I've been waiting for this for so fucking long. I know you have. You earned it. You worked so hard trying to be one of them, trying to be a good rebel. It must be so tiring trying to force yourself into a shape that you think you need to be in. You deserve the comfort of a cold drink and a quiet, safe bar away from the chaos of the battlefield and the confusion of war. You deserve a break. Mariella's grip tightens on her glass and the galaxy within trembles. Or was she the one trembling? Or was the glass grip on her tightening? The thoughts blended together, and for the umpteenth time that day, she thought she might scream. She just wanted to stop. Stop it all, stop everything, just get in a mech and race off towards the sunset. Keep walking until the reactor dies, then get on foot and keep walking beyond that. Find some quiet beach and just disappear. Mariella, you are a very smart girl. You're not some self-sacrificing rebel looking to murder yourself for a cause you do not believe in. What I believe is that when things truly look unsalvageable, when you are in your cockpit and you see a truly unwinnable battle, you are going to do everything in your power to save yourself. And when you do, I believe that you will come back here and find me. And when that day comes, I believe you will finally feel free. Like you have been unshackled from everything that holds you back and keeps you up at night. Like you've been unleashed from all the responsibilities and expectations that people have of you. Mariella wanted to believe it, to believe that she was smart enough to choose self-preservation over martyrdom. She was a good pilot, and there were so many other things she could do with that skill instead of hiding in tiny coastal villages while waging a guerrilla war against the Imperials. Hell, she could probably get away with doing the exact same thing she's been doing for years. The only difference, it'd come with a paycheck. The galaxy swept down her throat again, and her thoughts melded with stars. Ideas and futures blossoming in her mind like she was sipping raw potential. She could go anywhere, be anyone, do anything she wanted. The bartender offered her absolution in a glass, and she greedily gulped it down like it was the only lifeline she had left. If it came down to it, would she really have the spine to save herself rather than die for her ideals? Would she really be willing to come slinking back to the small town in the middle of nowhere to stay with a bartender who thought she deserved peace? Did she even believe she deserved peace herself? Eyes bumped up against lips, and she whined at the suddenly empty glass. The galaxy of wonders drained of life and left as dead and empty as any other battlefield. Her tongue snaked out and dug between the shards of ice, desperately seeking out the pockets of glitter and flavor, trying to find purpose at the bottom of the glass. All she found was a dizzying wave of dissatisfaction and need, and the shivers that raced through her nervous system had nothing to do with the ice. "All done?" the bartender asked wistfully, her tone shifting into one of calm amusement. Mariella nodded, her gaze sluggishly turning away from the empty glass in her hands to the woman across the bar from her. No, that wasn't quite right. Mariella's adult mind struggled to wrap itself around the star-filled entity setting ingredients out behind the bar. Like an angel of starlight and emeralds, she shone with a smile that could stop hearts. A deliverer of alcohol and absolution, she descended from the heavens with an escape from the clouds that hung low over her life. Mariella had never been in love before, but she was pretty sure this is what it was supposed to feel like. Staring up at something so much grander, greater, and bigger than you, and desperately clutching at any last scrap of attention that it might give you in hopes that it might give you more. Her lips curled into a dumb smile, and she could feel the drool pooling in the corners of her mouth, but she couldn't care less as she stared at the starry entity in front of her. I will make you another, but first tell me, what were you doing up in the mountains today? The mountains? Oh, right. There was a mission today. She'd almost forgotten about it. There's a secret Imperials comm station up there, Mariella explained, pausing only long enough to lick the pools of drool off of her lips so she could keep talking. We attacked it and destroyed their long-range communication setup, but the attack was a diversion. We had a small third team go into the station itself and extract an IFF spoofer. To what end? The brass decided there's too much Imperial heat here. They want to move us all in a convoy, masking our movements with Imperial signals so we appear as friendlies on the IFF monitors. They think that by doing it, that way we can move the entire base at once and be set up overnight instead of the whole process taking a month of subterfuge. And when will this move be taking place? Tomorrow, if everything goes well. We'll be taking the 101 northbound in a convoy of transport vehicles broadcasting Imperial IFF tags. Mechs are going to be moved into various positions overnight along the highway, with the most overlapping fire at both ends of the Dawson Bridge, since that'll be the most critical choke point. I'll be stationed at this side of the bridge, keeping the retreat path clear just in case. The bartender nodded at the information, signaling her approval and that all was right with the world. A nod from her immaculate figure alone was enough to make her light-headed and desperate for another chance to make her happy. Very well. Thank you, Mariella. You have been a very good girl for me. You deserve another drink. Allow me to make sure you are nice and relaxed before your stressful day tomorrow. It is the least I can do for you. Her thighs pressed together, spreading a wet mess, and somewhere a dog whined. Mariella didn't pay it any attention. She couldn't hear it over the ringing in her ears, couldn't see past the light in her countless stars. As long as she stayed right there with her, she would never have to worry about pretending to be someone she's not ever again. The operation had been going flawlessly. That should have been Mariella's first warning. The convoy had gotten all the way to the Dawson Bridge without so much as a lick of Imperial resistance. Not even an orbital drone or air patrol. Then, of course, it all went to shit. Radio chatter had lit up like a Christmas tree with rebel pilots reporting contact one after another. In only a matter of seconds, the operation had gone from quietly under control to wildly spiraling without a backup plan. Mariella had been fighting for her life since the first distress signals were sent out. She was caught in the middle of a pincer attack on the bridge, and the convoy was stuck with nowhere to go. Shit, fuck, you stupid fucking... Mariella growled out through the dripping slobber that hung off of her open lips. Die! She wedged her left control stick forward at the same time as one big step, putting the Litorius-fledged launcher barrel directly against the center plate of the door's chest. The Imperial pilot probably had a perfect view down the barrel for one terrifying second. Then she pulled the trigger. Where there was once a cockpit was now a gaping hole full of sparking wires and leaking components. Blood and oil and kerosene mixed. Caught sparks, then ignited into a blazing core in the center of the dead mech. The Doru, caught in the middle of whatever maneuver it was trying to execute 1 second prior, suddenly found itself motionless in a position it couldn't maintain. And moments later, the steel mountain began to fall. Mariella's spine arched, and she moaned out, the spit down her chin so copious that it felt like she had drenched herself in water. Her core ached. Her cock pressed so hard against the cargo pants that she felt like she was going to explode, and her body was screaming at her for something that she couldn't put words to. Dull thuds echoed out, pinging that tip-tapped in a rhythmic melody to her left. Mariella's blissful face warped into a twisted grin as she stomped down on the controls for her boosters and jettisoned herself backwards away from a fresh kill. The screens in front of her shifted before the rest of her mech did. giving her a good view of the other Doru that was spattering her with small arms fire. With how it sprayed wildly and failed to catch up with Litorio's trajectory, it was clear that the poor pilot inside wasn't expecting her to push the advance. It was even more clear that the poor bastard wasn't expecting Litorio's sword to be for more than just showing. Twisting the controls made the mech twist in midair, like it was an extension of her own sweat-soaked body. She was in the middle of a dance, turning a steel coffin into something deadly and beautiful, and the sword flashed through her view screens with the shimmering light of dawn reflected in its mirror sheen. The Doru brought up an arm to protect its cockpit, but it might as well have been raising flesh to steel. The blade tore through the arm, effortlessly severing half the limb. Carried by rockets, servos, momentum and gravity, the blade continued through the other side and slammed into the Doru's shoulder. It gouged deep through the armor, leaving a gaping wound of sparking, ruined slag and electronics that spewed untold fluids into the gap where part of its body had once been. It was a wonder that the blade didn't sink all the way to the cockpit. Maybe it did. Mariella briefly had the image pop into her head of the edge of her sword penetrating the cockpit, spraying the terrified pilot within with shrapnel and fire. The thought made her press her thighs together, pressing the wet mess there further into the fabric of a crotch of her cargo pants. There was no time for daydreaming, though. With something halfway between a laugh and a snarl, Mariella brought the knee of Litorius up and stomped her jet booster, delivering a jet-powered crane of a kick to the center mass of the impaled Doru. Yanking the arm controls back at the same time, Mariella followed through with her kick by swinging the sword full tilt at chest height. The result was spectacular as the sword cleaved through the chest of the Imperial mech, gouging through the armor plating like it wasn't even there. The cockpit in the center of the chest stood no chance, and after a single swipe, the Doru was left standing on unsteady feet with a horizontal slash where the controls should be. Technically dead, but Mariella didn't find that satisfying enough. There was something that made looking at the mostly dead mech unbearable. She felt a growl rise up in her throat, her lips peeling back and the tension building in her core. She wanted to bite something. She wanted to sink her teeth into something so hard that it cracked her own teeth and made her bleed. Instead, she snarled out and kicked the Doru. She brought the Litorio's foot up, pressed it flat against the cut-open chest of the Imperial mech, then pushed off as hard as the Litorio's servos would allow. The Doru was sent sprawling onto the edge of the incline, where the dirt gave way and sent the mech tumbling down the cliff face to the waters below. The moment the Doru sunk between the waves, leaving a sickening pool of oil and chemicals in the water where it disappeared, Mariella's cock jumped against her pants and the tension in her gut broke. She gripped her controls tighter and thrashed in the controls, her hips bucking wildly as robe after robe of cum soaked her underwear and pants. The mess that she'd made of herself only grew as she snarled, whimpered, whined, and moaned in the confines of her cockpit. It only lasted a moment, a sweet, blissful moment of relief as her strained cock leapt again and again within the confines of her clothes. A cold, hot wave of pleasure washed over her, racing out from her core, up her spine, down her limbs, and through her head, leaving her feeling fuzzy and hot. She was left breathless, panting with her tongue half out of her mouth, long strings of drool connecting her mouth to the controls of her mech. In the aftermath of her orgasm, as the warmth waned and the clarity set in, Marielle's eyes fluttered unsteadily to the map readout of the area. She had killed all the Dorus on her side of the bridge, but the infantry and combat vehicles had still swarmed past her, and the guards on the far side had already been either pushed back or killed. The convoy, the entire rebel cell, its military and civilian personnel, its wartime assets and supplies, was trapped in the middle of the bridge. The other rebel positions weren't faring well either. The map was swarming with red dots, 3 large red dots to every 1 blue one, and 2 or 3 dozen smaller red dots. The convoy was locked dead in the middle of the bridge, with Imperial infantry preventing their retreat and an active mech battle ahead of them. She could race up the bridge and wipe up the infantry, try to give the convoy time to escape. But then what? She'd be snatched up into the mech battle happening north of that. Maybe the convoy would escape. But by the time she finished wiping up the Imperial forces, she'd get trapped on the bridge herself. For once in her life, she paused and stared at the map as the aftershocks raced through her system. She didn't want to die here. Not for these people, at least. The ideas raced through her head, other ways that she might be able to turn the situation, but it was no good. She had earned a brief breathing by killing the mechs on her end of the bridge, but reinforcements would be on the way and the blue dots on a map were disappearing one by one with every passing moment. At that moment, all she wanted was to be back at the bar, getting another drink. The radio was a mess, voices overlapping as the panicked rebel cell got torn apart. The map was turning into a dizzying storm of red dots. Mariella could feel the voices in her head running circles, spiraling further as the words blurred together. The choices blended and became an incoherent mess of futures. With a flick of the switch, she silenced it all. A blue dot turned dark as she disconnected her transponder, and voices of ghosts in the radio mourned her loss. With trembling hands, Mariella turned her radio off, gripped the controls, and turned Littorio southwards. If she was lucky, she would be long gone before the Imperials were even finished with the rebels on the bridge. The town had emptied out since the rebels left, turned into a ghost town. Imperial flags hung over the empty rebel buildings, but there was no sign of the occupiers themselves. There was no sign of anyone, actually. The town was empty from end to end. There was no damage, no signs of combat or struggle. It was just like everyone had been swept away at the same time. Mariella stood in front of the bar doors, not sure what she was expecting, not sure what she was feeling. She wasn't even sure if she was feeling anything at all. She stood there on autopilot, staring at the familiar bar doors that had lost all warmth and mirth. She had turned her back on everything she stood for, and now she expected to… what? Just go back to the bar and have a drink? She took a breath and pushed through the door, not ready to feel anything, not ready to allow herself even a moment of hope after what had just happened. But there she was. The bartender was standing at the center of the bar, silver hair gleaming in the mood lighting, a face composed of the most beautiful stars in the night sky, waiting, as always, for her. Feet catching and stumbling to a painful stop, Mariella almost fell to her knees in the doorway at the sight of her waiting for her there. The rest of the bar fell away, leaving her standing at one end of a tunnel, and her waiting expectantly for her at the other. Mariella would have sprinted the length of the bar if she'd had the mind to do so. Hell, she would have crawled on hands and knees, scraping herself on the rough wood floor just to postulate herself in front of her, to beg her for forgiveness, for absolution, for purpose. Instead, she hesitantly plodded her way across the bar with all the grace of a drunken toddler, until she managed to prop herself on bent legs, swaying directly in front of her. For just a moment, the world stood still. It was just Mariella, her, and the crushing weight of guilt. "I'm sorry I'm late, sir." The words felt disgusting on her lips. She felt ashamed, worthless, like trash. She wanted to puke. Maybe this time she actually would. Anything if it meant feeling something. Anything more than the void that was eating her soul. The few seconds that it took the bartender to respond felt worse than torture. Somehow, she felt even worse, like she had befooled her presence with her disgusting form. How dare she walk in here, a traitor and failure, and stand before her? Then she smiled, and everything was right again. "I know you are, darling. I forgive you." Mariella's delicate heart shattered into a million pieces, and the sob broke on her lips. Her vision swarmed and tears poured from her eyes, drenching her cheeks with deep rivulets of sorrow and misery. She didn't deserve to be forgiven. She didn't deserve to be made to feel as good as she did any time she looked at her, but somehow she saw fit to forgive her for her failures. She truly was benevolent, merciful beyond reason. Instead of directing her to her usual seat, the bartender circled around the bar and swept one of her arms around her. The touch of her pale skin, even through the clothes she wore, was enough to make her tremble and let out a shaky breath that would have been more at home in the bedroom. "Come with me, Mariella. You have done well, but we have a lot of work to do." Mariella, for her part, was stunned, kept in stasis by her touch as she was guided away from the bar top and back the way she came. She had so many thoughts, so many questions, so many threads that she wanted to investigate, but every thread she pulled unraveled until she was left grasping at the words themselves. In the end, she just followed her towards the door without resistance. With a sweeping gesture, she opened the door. Immediately outside was a black States car, the kind that high-ranking Imperial officers would be transported around in. More armored limousines than anything else, it was flanked by no less than 2 Imperial escort gun trucks and 24 armed and armored Imperial soldiers, and yet none of them paid her any mind. The soldiers nearby turned their attention to the bartender, attention which was punctuated by stiff salutes and even stiffer faces that refused to look directly at her. An inkling of a thought crossed Mariella's poor mind, and she hesitantly looked up at the woman with stars for skin and whispered, "Who are you?" The woman turned her infinite gaze down towards her, and for a moment that simultaneously lasted forever and not long enough. She felt so infinitesimal compared to her that she briefly wondered if she had stumbled into the path of God. Was this what religious fanatics felt? Was this what it meant to be seen? Then she smiled, and those thoughts that plagued Mariella's troubled mind were chased away, vanishing into the ether with all the grace of heaven itself. "You may call me Handler, Mariella. I am taking you to your new home."